Okay, so how's everybody doing? So you might as well get comfortable because this is going to be a long one. I can't do this without giving theory and some kind of a, I don't want to call it a lecture really, but if I don't give you some kind of commentary first before I do any kind of demonstration, then it's just a waste. Furthermore, I would say apart from the most difficult aspect of a weathering tutorial is actually filming it. Like set me loose in a studio with 14 cars and you know a coffee, 4 hours of no phone, nobody, like lock the doors, and I'm going to go into a zone and I'm not coming out of there until I'm done. And what's going to come out of there is going to be something that I'm probably deeply satisfied with. Doing things this way is a real challenge. It's important though to the community to share because there's so many good painters out there. I mean, there's some young fellows that are into it now, and there's veterans out there, plus all the other painters that don't have the time of day or don't even care to even share it anyway. Like why, like they're not obligated to do it, I guess. But I mean, I've been painting my whole life since I was a kid. You know, like ever since I was. I mean, I don't know how old I was, like 6 or 7 or something, when I painted my first Airfix plastic Romans. I painted my first army of Romans. Like the little one. I think they were 176, and it just was something that I always did. In fact, when I was a teenager, I was painting them and selling them. To kids in the neighborhood and stuff, just so I could build up, my own collection and so on. And then even in my 20s and 30s, I was, moved up to metal figurines from England. They were just unbelievable historical sculpts from England of, just ancient figurine stuff. And I'd sell them in bars for $20, $50 a pop in the 80s. And, everything I made or painted, I sold. And I mean, there's were times in my life where I had nothing, like nothing left, like not even a figurine to my name, like no favorite, like not one personal one, unpainted maybe. And then, I mean, I don't know if I might have a few kicking around, but it was just something that I just learned how to do. I read the books. There was no social media back then, so you read every single piece of book and article you could get your hands on. And the only way you could really learn how to do it was to actually do it. I think nowadays, like we're all victims of the consumer society. The instant I want it now. I mean, even the model railroad hobbies like that with the ready to run, instant scenery, instant track, instant cars, instant detail. Now that I heard that, I don't know if it was Athearn or somebody that, oh yeah, we want to do a series of weathered cars. I mean, this one was sort of a patch version, but that ready for weathering. Like, I don't know how they're going to pull that off, to be frank, because the actual weathering part is an art in itself, and you can't really teach it. You have to learn it. Like, you have to be willing to just say, okay, I'm gonna dive into this, and I'm gonna watch, the masters, or read the masters, or glean as much information as I can, and then we get it all in our head, and then when we sit down to do it, it doesn't come out. you know? Like it doesn't, like it's not automatic. I'm sorry. Like if you're coming to this thinking that I'm going to give you an ABC 1 2 3 method and you're going to paint like me, sorry to disappoint you. you know I mean, I can give you some tips and show you, take you through the motions of what I do, but like you're not holding my hand. Like I can't hold your hand. Like like hold your hand with the airbrush and move it. Yeah. Like you have to glean what you can and then just start doing it. Like this whole idea too about mastering, right? Like the only master like that's a bit of a misnomer. Like if somebody calls you master, then fine, right? But the person that's being called the master would never tell you that they are. Like they say anyway, the masters, if they're out there, it takes 10,000 hours to master something. 10,000. Like there may be some painters out there, like maybe some young fellas, right? Like, with the big following, and they think they're really something, But they'll find out, like sooner or later, right? Like, if they see a piece, like I'm not saying my work, but if they really see a master, produce a piece, um, you know, like it's humbling, you know, and I think it's very subjective as well. Like a car might look fantastic to somebody, and it might not look so good to somebody else, you know. People will say, "Oh, look at that! Those cars look fantastic," and I think they like my own work, and I think they look like crap, live, like in front of me. So it's definitely a desirable art form. It's something that you have to learn. It's very difficult to teach. It's difficult to record or to film. I mean, even if you had a studio with pros and support and a whole crew and 14 of the same cars and reshooting the same angle over and over again with all the massive lighting, and I wonder if it would even come out like the way the artist would intend it to anyway, because of the distract. There's no way that an artist can even function like that, I guess. I mean, if you're an actor, it's different, but if you're in film, like a painter or a set builder or whatever, like you're got your head in your job, man. Like you're in a creative zone, like just going at it. Like you're not like orchestrating and choreographing every move because there's a camera over your shoulder. Anyway, yeah, you know, I'll take you into this tutorial. I'll show you one of the methods or a few of the ones that I use. Like it's not the only way. Um, I use all these paints, these mediums, as you can see, the oils, and I got more brushes than you can shake a stick at, obviously. And these are pastels, but they're oil based. They're different. They're like a paint kind of by Tamiya. Like they're not the powdery type pastels that fall off or disappear when you flat coat them. And then the isopropyl based and then water based. And this is my kit right here. This is what I use to paint everything. Like scenery, buildings, cars, figurines, you name it. This is my system and I won't change it ever as long as I live because I'm completely confident and comfortable with it. And that's what you have to do. You have to build your kit too. And you got to just work and what you feel comfortable with and what you're confident with and just stick with it and then hone your skills. Master your art form through time, you know. Now this is a much lighter car. Like this is sort of was a white Athearn Genesis mechanical reefer. And I would say that white's probably the easiest to weather. I mean, it doesn't take much to make them look weathered. And in this case, as some of you may or may not know, I like to use the Tamiya flat when I go to the brushes. Now this has the talcum powder. Like somebody mentioned a while ago, oh yeah, well, you get the white sort of chalky effect if you don't thin it enough. Well, I don't want to thin it to lose the white chalky effect. Actually, I want the, like this looks like it looks gray inside. It's full of, you can see it around the edge here sometimes, but it's full of, you know, like, I don't know what it is, some kind of chalk or talcum powder anyway. So I just paint it, the Tamiya X21 flat base, I just paint it straight onto the car in a downward motion like that. And then what happens is within 10 minutes it goes all chalky white. And it doesn't matter what the car is or whatever, like it'll all basically come off. You just take a stiff brush like this and you just brush it away, but it will leave little faded sort of residue you can see on the blue here. It's knocked it down, you know, in a subtle way, like enough to create a bit of a fade. And then you can see on the roof here what it's done. This was a shiny silver roof. Well, this is just straight X21 flat base on the roof. Okay. And I actually quite like that just for starters. It's a nice base and it adds a type of tooth, like a texture. So when you use watercolors, which are quite slippery, opposed to oils, which I also like to use now and again, but I really, to be honest, I don't like pulling out the solvents or the you know, the odorless mineral spirits. As good as they are, and I will admit, and I know from, you know, just in the past, oils have the best transparency there is. But I've really moved over to the acrylics, and you can do quite a bit with the acrylics if you learn to suspend them in water enough and try to avoid some of the flood marks they tend to leave. Okay? But you can dab those away or Q-tip them away with isopropyl alcohol. So what I did with this is I laid on the flat X21 base and then I brushed it off. I left a little bit of the chalk in little residual areas because it'll wick up some of the different umbers and weathering colors as well and give you a neat sort of effect, you know, in the crevices and the engraving and stuff. Okay, and then what I did was I just put a very thin light wash of yellow ochre. I like to use yellow ochre with white first rather than, you know, like burnt umber, which can be really strong right off the top. But I want to create a filter of yellow ochre first on this white. You can see how it's sort of yellowy faded color. That's what I did last night. Very thin. And then this is a patched car, so I faded it like the whole car with the patch, and then I took some Tamiya tape and just boxed out the patch, because when I put this darker burnt umber wash, this is probably all I'm going to do on this car, by the way, too. Maybe just a touch on the roof, but that's all I'm going to do. I don't want to over weather this car. And then I'll airbrush the bottom of it with Tamiya track or rail brown and the wheels. I'm not going to pull these apart. There's pickups here. I'm just going to be careful, mask it over, and because I want to take this car apart again. You know, every time you take these things apart, you lose pieces, and you know. So that's what I'm going to do. So all I'm going to do with this is put it up on an angle because I want it to run down. And then I'm going to take I got a bit of water here. Okay. And then I got some of this burnt umber number 71.040 model there. And I'm just going to dip the end of the brush in like that. And I'm just going to start laying some of it on. And then I'm going to go to water right away. Okay. Now the trick is with this is to keep it wet. Keep it wet. Lots of water. Just get a bit of pigment on there. Keep it wet. Keep the whole side of the car wet. Let it flood into those deeper cracks like up by the roof line here. These are really nice cars, so when you put a dark wash like this, and a wash is not like a, you know, where you go and you buy a bottle that says wash. It's just thinned paint. That's all it is. There's nothing magical about it. All right. Just take any color and just add 90% water to it, and you'll have yourself a nice wash. So I want to keep this wet, and now there'll be the odd little spot now and again You know, I just keep stroking it. Don't let it dry there. Just keep the whole side of this car wet. Get the most of it up top here. Okay? And then just, you can just stroke her down like that. And then I like to just get the brush, with a lot of water, and then just stroke it and just work it down, but try to do one pass like this. See that yellow filter is very subtle, but it's going to have an effect on this burnt umber as well. And where you want it a bit stronger, just pick up a little more pigment, and and it'll pool on the bottom here, see? But I'm going to let it pool down here by this track, this door track here, because that's where a lot of rust is going to build up, because of these rollers are going to wear the paint off. Then you can wick stuff off. But the trick is to get it wet, wet on wet. It's an old watercolor term. And, just keep playing around with it as it's drying and try to eliminate any flood marks. But if you get, just keep playing with it. Keep it wet, let it dry, just keep it wet. Just relax and just, keep stroking it down until you like what you see. See, here's some interesting kind of things happening here that I like. That's the key, right, is lots of water. It's a little bit lighter up here on the door and a little bit darker down here, which I kind of like as well. That's all this car really needs. You know what I mean? I mean, just looking at it now that's all I really want on this car. Like, I've looked at a few photos of these solid cold mechanical reefers, and they actually have this either burnt umber, raw sienna, or a yellow ochre. 3 different cars. So this I'll probably call done. Like, that's enough, right? So all it was on the raw car was flat base, and then I rubbed off the chalk, and it just takes the shine and the slipperiness away of the surface. And then I put a very light wash on of yellow ochre, number 71.033, very thin. And then the next is 71.040 burnt umber, and that's what it looks like. And that's good enough for me. And then I'll probably peel off this tape tomorrow, and if I want, I can put another maybe very subtle light wash over that, or leave it freshly patched. Okay? Okay, so now that the roof is done, and it's drying actually, and you can see some of the white chalky sort of residual that was left on this roof. You can see it. It's coming off, drying, and coming through the layer and looking like a type of oxidization, you see. That's the reason for my madness with this X21 flat base. It's the base coat that comes through the subsequent layers later, the water, when it's all water based, right? And I should also mention that when you paint this first, the whole car, except for maybe, the very ends where all the detail is, because you don't want to be stabbing away with a bristle brush and knocking parts off. Anyway, you'll learn that as you go, but you let this dry overnight. Okay, and then once you put water-based, but don't put any more alcohol-based paint. Once you use the flat Tamiya base with this method, that's it. Don't use any more Tamiya isopropyl alcohol-based paints on here. Just use watercolor, water-based paints. Okay, and it won't touch this base, which comes through. You'll see, like, it's going to do neat little effects, as I've described in earlier content that I've shared. See it? How it's drying there? I mean, that looks really cool. I like that. And all that is to me a flat base X21 dried overnight, and then a very thin wash, lots of water, burnt umber, and that's what you get. That's easy, right? Okay, so here's the other side, and you can see I've varied it. There's quite a bit heavier here, and then I'm coming back with just water, see? And I'm just washing it away, carrying it back up. See how it's pooling on the bottom here? Because of the car is propped up. And if you want to add a little bit more, then you just, squeeze a little pigment into your tray and dip your brush. I don't know if I want this much here though. This seems a bit strong for me, but now remember, don't use isopropyl alcohol to thin these Vallejo paints when you're doing this. If you do, you'll cut through that flat base and you'll make a mess of things. As long as you use just water and use just water and Vallejo air, you'll never cut through the Tamiya isopropyl base. Never. It won't touch it. It's rock solid. It's not going anywhere. Sometimes you got to be careful too, because I like to clean my brushes with some water and maybe a cap full of isopropyl, and I dip my brush and I go back onto the model, and that can bite you. So you got to watch out for that. Okay, so there's a little bit of varied there. I think I'm going to leave that. I kind of like that actually. And if I want to wick some of this out, remember, lots of water. Just dab it on your cloth here, and then you can just, I like a nice wide brush like this. You can wick some of it away, but I don't want to wick this way. I want this, when this dries, this pooling here, it's going to reduce. Like when the water evaporates slowly, it's going to leave a little tiny bit of flood mark, but that's okay when you're doing rust though. A little bit of that can work in your favor. But you just want to stay with it, so that you can control your filter a bit and see where it's going. But I kind of like that. And like one side might have a little bit more rust too, like maybe where it's parked all the time on one side, or of a building where there's a lot of shade, or maybe water's. I mean, cars are these cars are all over the place, all over the country. You don't know if the same car's been parked under the same tree, or there's so many things. I mean, all the hack marks that you'll see on the sides of you'll see a lot of these sort of horizontal rust scrapes. Well, that's from loaders and stuff using their forklift, because the doors get jammed and stiff, so they put the fork on the end of the door like this, and they shove it close and scrape down the side of the car. The Jippo, the Jippo forklift driver. Anyway. Okay, so here's something that I want to show you that I do, and this seems to go against the very thing that I just said about not putting isopropyl onto any of this model air. Now you can, okay, so this is what I call maybe more advanced kind of weathering, but if you work with paint long enough, you get quite confident with it, and you've painted 1,000 models or something, or hundreds of models, and you've made all the mistakes, or most of them anyway, because there's always ones that you're not familiar with. Sometimes forced, rehearsed mistakes in terms of paint application can have or achieve very remarkable results. Now, one of the things that I like to do is for my roofs, because the roofs of cars are varied. There's 1,001 different types of looks on roofs. They're just subject to so much heat and cooling and dirt and carbon and weather. And what I often like to do is, because I'm never worried about what the roof looks like so much, what I like to do is I take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and I'll just drip on, and now see, let it react adversely to that paint. Because sometimes what this will do is it'll oxidize on its own, and you're not really in control of that. But oftentimes you'd be quite surprised at the results. It can be quite remarkable. Okay, so it's just a matter of sitting back and watching what it does as it dries. Now you can pop the roof off of this car. These sound ones, I'm not going to bother here. So I've painted so many of these cars over the years. I'm too lazy to do that kind of thing now. I mean, it wouldn't take much, but I'm not concerned about it right now because sometimes I actually, if something drips down the side later, I can clean it up with isopropyl and turn it into a random streak. I like to allow a lot of my mistakes and just the randomness of sort of subconscious painting create effects for me as well. I don't like to methodically, choreograph every move when I paint. I like to let just the fallibility of the painter, because we all are, to work in my favor. Okay. Okay, I don't think that's really doing anything yet, but it will when it dries, though. You can see how the isopropyl will actually lift the Vallejo, or it'll sort of peel. If you stab it with a brush, just a dry brush even. You just never know what it'll do, but sometimes this type of an effect is pretty hard to manipulate, like do individually, like microscopically with a brush. So I like to try to use the different mediums that are available to try and work in my favor this way. This car really likes to rock and roll, doesn't it? So essentially what the isopropyl will do is it'll actually dab away and lift that floqual paint in a sort of a scale type flaky manner. This is where you use the incompatibility of a product from an artistic point of view to work in your favor if you're into pursuing the layered approach. Sometimes you notice on these cars, just one side of them will be rusted. Oh, I'm really liking this. So I don't know if it shows yet, but you can see the oxidization here. I don't want to tilt this yet because I don't want this to pool to one side. When this burnt umber now has got a blend of isopropyl seeping into it. There's mixed medium going here on the roof now, isn't there? Okay. By laying on the isopropyl over top of the watercolor layer, and then I'm just playing around. Like, I don't know what it's going to do. I mean, I sort of know what it's going to do from experience, but I don't know like all the details and the character of how it's going to sort of emulsify and oxidize. But when it's a roof, that's the way the real world happens. It's not like there's nobody up there. There's no gremlins up there painting it. So anyway, this will do that. Isopropyl 99%. So I'm really liking what's happening here. Like there's a type of oxidization. It almost looks like an earth color, but it's a derivative of the oxidizing effect and a little bit of this that got on the edges earlier. Like that'll get sucked into things. If you use other very subtle thin layers like white, like even if I put a layer of white on this, like just a thin wash of white watercolor prior to the isopropyl, it'll just reappear. Like it'll come out through another layer and do a type of just super realistic oxidization. Okay. Okay, so I've got 20 psi on the airbrush here, and I've got the best lighting I can get on this. If I put more on it, just creates more shadow. So, and because this is black, it's just the nature of the beast. So I'll try to keep this at a angle here where you can really appreciate and see the paint going on. So what I want to do is just look over here to the corner here. I'll show you. I just want a small line like this. Okay. A small line like this. Okay, that's just due to how much you learn to pull back on the trigger. This is a kind of an all-in-one airbrush, the Omni 5000, so you can do really thin lines and really broad spray. That's why I love this airbrush so much. So what I'm going to do is I just want to, sort of apply the paint like it's a pencil, right? And don't worry about getting any paint on the side, on the bottom side sill of the car, because that can be cleaned up later. And you want some little bit of overspray on there because of the what comes off the track and the rails, right? It spreads everywhere like that. So you just want to set your brush up. Like, don't be in a hurry. Don't like do one spray coverage. Just pretend it's like a coloring pencil. And another advantage is too is where the black frame is. Even if you don't get inside those corners, just leave it, because it's that's your darkest shadow anyway. Okay, and so you'll see that this actually acts like almost like a highlight. Spray the bottom of these couplers. And the trucks, and I'm going to paint the wheels as well, because and the side of the trucks. Just give them a spin while you shoot some paint. So with some of these small details, this little brush was a sort of, I soaked the tip in some glue. And I made it so it's this stiff, wand. Right, the fibers are all in one, and I use it for doing these rust spots and stuff. And as you can see here, this is all this damage along here on this door would be from a forklift driver coming along, and because the doors maybe tight or stiff or won't close, which is common with older box cars. Yeah, they just use the forklift. They come up with the fork and they put it at the edge of the door and they shove and scrape all down the car like that. That's where all that comes from. So I thought I'd model some of that on this since, that happens, right? Anyway, it's all part of the fun, right? Okay, so I just, in terms of finishing up details, in this particular case, I just want to share a little bit about just the highlighting part, and there's a few ways you can do that. When I do dry brushing, dry brushing is a term used for when you take a brush, preferably not your favorite brush, because you're going to destroy your paintbrush like eventually. Like dry brushing does that, especially if you use enamels or acrylics. Where you grab a real light color, like in this case, in this yellow, I would use a white to bring out the rivets or something, or a really light, like Naples yellow with some white. Anyway, you use a lighter color, progressively lighter and lighter, and it just adds more depth. It's the light, right, that you're catching on the high points to really make the model pop. Now, in this case, I'm probably not going to do that. I mean, I would probably use that method for a competition model. I would probably use oils because they just will get you a few more points in terms of, just the transparency and the richness of the pigment. But in this case, it's just for my own layout, and I'm not really that particular about it. And I'm pretty happy with, the models that I just do now, without any pressure or anything like that. So I take a Q-tip like this and just, roll it in a, just roll it on the cloth here, just get most of it off. And you can come in here and you can just rub, and because the car is white to begin with, you can rub some of that away. The flood marks or wherever the rust or the burnt umber was on the high points. Like even these rods here. See, watch. And you just remove the top of it. The color comes off on the Q-tip there. And, it helps make those ribs and so on, high points, pop a little more. Because the original color of the car was white, right? But remember in the beginning how I put a filter, a yellow ochre filter on it? Okay? And so we'll just do a little bit more here just to show you. So down here it'll probably show up. Down here it'll probably show up a bit more because it's darker, right, with the wash. But we just want to just rub that lightly, and maybe a little bit of this plate here. Just whatever you feel, right? Those locking rods, that go across there. See that? You see how that? Do a little bit down here too. See how that starts to? Well, I'll just take a little bit more there. See how that starts to pop a bit. See? Okay, so this final rust streaking is done with a 3/4 inch grainer brush, it's called. You notice the split hairs. And then this is Winsor & Newton, the best pigment you can get. And it's burnt sienna. And I'll just show you how I do those final rust streaks. The brush is important. This spread out fibers on the brush is called a grainer, and it looks like this. Notice the tips here. And then it's just dipped in mineral spirits clean, and you dab on the tiny, tiny little spots, and then you just do one stroke down like this, or two if you have to. Just place it down on the model and then pull straight down.